Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's episode of The Formula, where we break down and explore the elements of achievement in world-class performers. I'm your host, Trevor Carlson, and I hope that you are having a lovely morning or evening wherever you are. So when I say we break down the elements of achievement, I mean that I get the opportunity to sit down with people from all over the world in all kinds of different fields and backgrounds and talk with them about what things, experiences, routines, failures have led to their personal or professional success today. And then we also discuss what advice they would share with others who are facing something similar. This week's guest is author Barry McDonagh. Barry is the author of a best-selling book called D.A.R.E. D.A.R.E. is really about anxiety relief. If you're anything like me, I've struggled with some form or another of anxiety for most of my life. I didn't even know that's what it was. I just knew that, that feeling you get in the pit of your stomach when you don't know what to say or you don't know what to do and you start sweating. It's really not a very fun experience. So after I read the book, I invited Barry on the show and we had a great talk about where did Barry's interest in anxiety research come from and how he got started. What is the D.A.R.E. process to anxiety relief, and how is it useful for people with anxiety to take this approach? So I really enjoyed this interview with Barry. I felt like I had some takeaways on how I could work through maybe some social anxiety that I get in different scenarios. And I hope that for you listeners out there, you can have a few takeaways as well. Maybe you're inspired to pick up Barry's book and follow part of the process that he lays out and maybe find some anxiety relief for yourself. So without me talking about any of the anxiety topics or anything like that anymore, let's get this episode started with author Barry McDonagh. On this week's episode of the Formula Podcast, I have Barry McDonagh, author of the book called D.A.R.E. It's a really in-depth book on the process of the anxiety experience and some different strategies and techniques on how to work through them. Barry, I want to say thank you for taking the time to show up on our show today. And my first question is, what really got you into studying anxiety?
Hey, Trevor, thanks for having me. So all of the work I do came from personal experience. I used to suffer from general anxiety and panic attacks or panic disorder just towards the end of when I was finishing school and moving into college. So all of it came about from that experience. And there was probably about a year and a half where I went through a very kind of dark time with anxiety. Where I would say I was feeling anxiety on a daily level quite high and experiencing many panic attacks. So that was my, introduction to anxiety. And it was through that experience that I discovered a different way to end anxiety and panic attacks. And by different, I mean the conventional approach to kind of tackling anxiety is to manage it. Find ways to relax yourself, to distract yourself. And, different techniques for reducing stress. And I found that none of that works when you're in a very high state of anxiety. So when you're either, very close to having a panic attack or really when you're just stuck in that anxious loop of fearing fear all the time. And, what really happened for me was I was experiencing, first panic attack kicked off and if anyone has had panic attack who's listening knows it's a really terrifying experience. And your first one is usually the scariest because you don't know why it's happening. And, you think you're having a heart attack or a stroke or, something, that you're very close to dying. And then as I discovered that it was anxiety, I realized how scared I was of it, how scared I was of the sensations. The particular sensations that were scaring me were tight chest, sensation not being able to catch my breath and pounding hard for fear that it was a heart attack, stuff like that. And then other kind of more general anxiety stuff like intrusive thoughts or sensations of unreality, all that stuff that goes with an anxiety disorder. And it was just when I hit rock bottom one day, I was in my bedroom and I just said to it, I said to anxiety, I said, you better kill me instead of threatening me like this because I'm missing out on life. You better finish me off. That was kind of how I felt at that stage. So I was kind of saying to the anxiety, come on, give me your worst panic attack, bring it on. And it was weird because as soon as I did that, I felt this shift of relationship with the anxiety. I just no longer felt as threatened by it. And so I started playing around with that approach in lots of different ways and in lots of different situations, basically using this process of what I later discovered is called paradoxical intention, coined by Dr. Viktor Frankl, which is this idea of demanding more of the thing that you're afraid of in order to end the fear of it. And, that is at the core of what I teach. And it's a very, very empowering tool for people. And it's a tool that most people haven't come across, or an approach most people haven't come across, because the mainstream approach is still very dominant. That mainstream approach of distraction, deep breathing, relaxation, but not this idea of making it worse, running into it, running through it in order to be free of it. So yeah, that was kind of that was my introduction to anxiety.
Yeah. That's such a fascinating concept to me, because as I'm sitting here, I'm like thinking about even some recent anxious situations where I'm just like I think anybody listening that has had anxiety or struggled with anxiety, like I have, are probably like, I wonder if I just would have, instead of not necessarily cowering from it or panicking, if you just would have run towards it. Like what kind of a difference that would have made.
Yeah, it's really about training yourself to be comfortable with the discomfort of it. And that's where a lot of the freedom is found. In the same way, when you're in the gym and you want to push yourself to the next level, it's like, how much discomfort are you willing to experience in order to achieve your goals? So in the gym case, in order to get fitter or build more muscle, whatever it is. And it's with anxiety and with a lot of emotions, a lot of difficult emotions, it's often a case of how willing are you to sit with this, to really sit with this, to accept and allow it in order for it to transform. And there is this strange thing that happens with emotions, that particularly anxiety, that if we really learn to sit and accept the feeling and not run from it, not resist it, not fight it, it starts to go through this subtle transformation. And it's like anxiety is a contraction. So when you're anxious, your whole body contracts and your mind contracts. And what we're trying to do with these techniques is trying to loosen that contraction and enter back into a state of flow again, where you're engaged with life again and you're not caught up in your thoughts and you're not caught up in that vicious fear of, fearing fear. Because that's what's really driving anxiety disorders, is a fear of fear. It's a fear of the anxiety manifesting. So it's whether you're out socially, it's a fear that you're going to have those sensations again and make a fool of yourself, or when you're sitting at home and you're starting to feel a tight chest or pounding heart, it's a fear of those sensations that might trigger the panic attack. And the only way to end those fears, that fear of fear, is to go through it. So like the only way out is through. And it's so it's very much about ending anxiety by acting bravely. And that's why the title of the book, D.A.R.E, feeds in very well to that. It's about daring to act bravely in order to overcome your anxiety.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way you get confidence back in any of those situations that anxiety has stolen from you. Anxiety steals your confidence in your body, and it steals your confidence in your mind. And by your body, I mean, you fear that that your body is going to collapse in some way or fail in some way. Most people think they're going to die when they're having a panic attack. And then it steals your confidence in your mind, because you start to think you're going nuts. You have intrusive thoughts, or you just feel that the functioning of your brain has somehow failed. And that steals that confidence that, you can handle situations and you can handle yourself. And it's a very horrible place to be, because it's just it's so isolating. It's so upsetting. It's such an uncomfortable feeling. And I don't think there's anything more unnerving than the fear of losing your mind. And people who are highly anxious oftentimes fear that they're losing their mind, and the good news is that there's very simple solutions to take you back into a much better state of mind and into eventually a full recovery from anxiety. And that's a message most people don't hear, is that it is possible to fully recover from an anxiety disorder. Again, most people are given an idea that this is kind of who you are and you'll have to be like this the rest of your life and just manage it, back to that word of management. Whereas I like to go for full recovery. That's what I want to see people achieving. And they achieve it by the effort that they put in. So they achieve it by the level of bravery that they're willing to act out, and by how much practice they're going to do. Because a lot of this work is really about practicing in situations with the D.A.R.E tools. So you put yourself into anxious situations, and then you suddenly realize, wow, I can actually handle this situation. I didn't die. I didn't faint. I didn't go screaming like a lunatic to get off the airplane. I managed myself quite well. It was uncomfortable. Like, I'm not saying any of this will be easy. It's a lot of the times it's quite uncomfortable, but that's different than, running away from and trying to escape. It's about how, as I said, how much discomfort are you willing to accept in the situation in order to be free of it. And a lot of people think it's strange that, I say overcoming, when you're working with D.A.R.E, for example, it's not about getting rid of the anxious sensations. And that confuses people, because that's exactly what they want to get rid of. But the first thing you have to get rid of is your fear of the anxious sensations and your fear of the anxious thoughts. And when you get rid of that fear, then eventually the sensations and the thoughts disappear by themselves. This kind of unwinding happens, or sometimes it feels like layers are being peeled off, layers of anxiety are falling off. And it's quite a natural process. And the time frame depends on person to person. Some people it happens really fast, other people it takes a few months.
Yeah. Man, I read your book, and there was a few quotes and things that popped up, and they're related to what you were just talking about. One was the cave that you fear to enter the most is the one that holds the treasure you seek.
Joseph Campbell, yeah.
Yeah, The Hero's Journey. I've heard that quote before, but when I read it in the context of anxiety and running towards the anxiety, like literally just saying, like, bring it on, like, give me the worst anxiety panic attack you possibly can. It was just like, it changed my thought around it. Because typically, I'm not sure if this is normal behavior for everyone else that gets anxiety, but if I get anxiety, I'm just like, I want to get as far away as possible from the thing that's causing me anxiety.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we as humans, we want to run away from pain and discomfort, and it's a natural response to want to, shut down or push away uncomfortable emotions and feelings. But it's this weird thing with anxiety that the more you resist it, the stronger it comes back. It's a bit like, this beach ball that you have in the pool, and the more you try and push it down, the harder it pops back up in your face. That's very true with anxiety, the way it comes back at you like that. So we have to take a different approach, have to come at it a different way. And then when you do, you go, wow, you get that feeling of looseness that I talked about. Like it's kind of a state of flow starts to happen again. And you go, actually, something's changing here, something's shifting. And it's very empowering for people. But, I'm not surprised you suffer from anxiety. I mean, I think we live in an age of anxiety now where a lot of people are reporting to suffer from anxiety, particularly younger people. So teens and people in their 20s, it's becoming more of an issue. And I think the good thing is people are speaking about it more. So they're admitting to it more, which is good because it kind of helps to take away the stigma of anxiety.
Right. Yeah, because you also have, I mean, you cover this in the book too, but you have this guilty feeling around it. You're like, I'm anxious, and now I'm like guilty I'm anxious, or I feel bad that I'm anxious. And it's the shame.
It's particularly for men as well. There's a lot of shame that goes with anxiety because you feel that you're weak in some way. Like, why can't I sit to get my hair cut? To get such a simple thing done. Why am I afraid of being in this situation? There's no threat here, and yet I'm afraid, I'm anxious of it. Yeah. And I'm thinking about how I can escape it. And that can make anyone feel very, can create like kind of low self-esteem because it's like, God, I can't even do simple stuff. What is wrong with me? Everyone else can function. what's up with me? And that's why people start thinking, oh, now my brain must be broken in some way. Something really seriously wrong with me. Whereas there isn't. It's just a behavioral problem that can be overcome, once you learn to step out of that vicious loop of fearing fear.
Yeah. Let's talk about that a little bit, like through the D.A.R.E process. How do you, well, first of all, I don't know if a lot of the listeners know what the D.A.R.E process is. So can you kind of walk us through that and really how that helps you work through or run towards your anxiety and really get that recovery from it?
Yeah, so D.A.R.E is an acronym for diffuse, allow, run towards, and engage. So you've got those 4 steps. And the 3 other steps are actually really leading to the 4th most important step, which is that engagement step that's where you want to be. You want to be back engaged with life, not caught up in your head, not thinking or worrying about anxiety. So it's like the three other steps are kind of pushing you into that flow state again, engaged. So you just feel like your old carefree self again. And so basically the first step, diffuse, is about diffusing this anxious monster. Like a lot of people think anxiety is like a monster attacking them in some way. And that diffuse step is, how can you make light of it? How can you use humor? How can you be dismissive of the anxiety as it arises to stop it from building? So you might use approaches like, when anxiety says something like, you're out and about, let's say you're on the airplane and you start to feel tight chest and pounding heart, and your anxiety says, oh no, what if I have a panic attack here? And then you move into that first step, which is diffusing, and you're making light of it by saying something like, so what, whatever, or who gives a fuck. Sometimes using curse words is very empowering, because it kind of creates an emotive shift within you. So, I get people to play around, be comical. They can come up with a cartoon character for their anxiety, so it makes it much less threatening. And in that first step, they're just being really dismissive of it, or treating it like a small child who's having a tantrum. And then the second step, it moves into that state of acceptance where it's like, okay, so I am feeling anxious. I've got that feeling in my body. So I'm going to accept and allow it. And it's teaching people how to really sit with discomfort for long periods of time, not trying to push it away in any way. And the really important part of that step is that you don't do the step in order to get rid of the anxiety. So it's not like you're sitting there saying, okay, I accept my anxiety. Now I hope it'll just go because I'm accepting it. I'm doing the work, so it should be gone. That's still resistance. That's still you wanting it gone. It's really getting to that state of going, okay, if I'm going to feel this way all day, that's fine. A bit like having a headache or a migraine. I'll just get on with it, get on with my day. And I'm not going to pay it much attention. I'm going to allow it to be there without trying to get rid of it. And then on to the third step, which is that run towards step, which is really about when anxiety is starting to peak higher and higher, and you're flipping fear into excitement. So you're saying, okay, so I have all this nervous energy that's here. Now I'm going to do something with it, and I'm going to turn it into excitement. So you start telling yourself, for example, that you're excited by this nervous arousal that you're feeling. And this is where you might also say, I want a panic attack. Bring it on. Show it to me. I'm enjoying this. You change that nervous arousal into the same kind of buzz, positive buzz you might get from drinking too much coffee, from all that kind of excited energy, and then you channel it into something. So instead of getting really scared of that heightened nervous arousal and sensation, you're flowing with it, you're moving with it. So instead of locking it down and contracting around it, you're moving into a state of flow with it. And, movement is great in this state. Muscle contractions are a great way as well. So like tensing and releasing muscles is a really effective way to help shift that sensation into one of excitement rather than fear. And it also causes a reduction in stress hormones. So that's a really important step, is because it's a complete shift in mindset for a lot of people. Most people, when they're in that really, let's call it an 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 level, they're in shutdown mode. They want to hide away, and they want to run back to their safe zone, which is usually their bedroom or somewhere, their home at least. But what I'm saying to them is that you need to be out in the world and shifting and changing this experience, changing these sensations into just nervous arousal. So instead of calling it a panic attack, you're just calling it nervous arousal and nothing else. or an adrenaline flood. Instead of, giving it this negative connotation, you can change it into something positive, and then use that positive energy, express yourself even more fully. If you're giving a public speech, use that nervous energy, push it out there, connect. And then fourth and final step is connecting again, engaging. So you've moved through the first three steps, and then it's about, okay, that's kind of enough of giving anxiety all that attention. Now I'm going to go back to what I was doing. So you focus back on the conversation you're having with a person, or the work you're doing, or even if it's just driving the car, you get very present in the moment. And the reason that's effective is because it helps you to stop ruminating and going back over the anxious thoughts again and again. And it's about connecting with life again, which is the step or the state that you want to be in. It's that state of, I'm just here. I'm, my happy, carefree self, and I'm not worried about all this internal stuff that's going on. So, and that fourth final step isn't a type of distraction. It's just engagement with life, with an awareness that all this nervous arousal still might be going on, but you're still deciding, you're making a conscious decision to focus on what you want to focus on, which is whatever is in your environment.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, so I read the book. I've started implementing some of the processes that you've discussed, and it's been, I think, the most impactful one for me so far, and I can see why, because I probably haven't moved past the second phase yet, is the diffuse. So, I'd say, so what, or who gives a fuck, or something like that. And then I'm like, oh, so what? Okay. And then I start going through the acceptance process. But I think what I'm doing is I'm accepting this so it'll leave.
Yeah, you and everyone else when they start, it's because you do want it to go. You don't want the discomfort. It's a hard kind of flipping mindset to go, actually, I'm going to be okay with this pain and this discomfort. I'm going to allow it. That bit takes practice.
Yeah. How would you recommend going about the practice of letting go of that expectation that it'll leave once you accept it?
Yeah, I think, you remind yourself of the long-term goal, which is to be free of anxiety. And that motivates you to do the work. So it's like when you wake up in the morning and you've got that kind of feeling in the pit of your stomach, and immediately you're thinking of the day ahead and all the things you've got to do and how you're going to cope. You shift and say to yourself, okay, so this is going to be like a training day. I'm going to use this day as an opportunity to practice. And that's the best way of approaching it, is always, every time you get anxious, say to yourself, good, here's an opportunity to practice. I was reminded of Jocko Willing's, you probably know his podcast or videos where he talks about when anything negative happens, say the word good. And you can apply the same thing with anxiety. Anxiety manifests and you go, good. Here's a good chance for me to practice these tools and get better and improve so I can overcome anxiety, so I can really master these sensations or feelings. So I think just having that, having your goal and just having that positive mindset of good, here's a great opportunity to practice will help you to move into that state of acceptance. And try not to look for it to be gone, try not to say, okay, it should be gone by now. And don't beat yourself up if it isn't, just be okay with the anxiety staying as it is. That in itself just takes a lot of weight off your shoulders.
Yeah. I'll check back in with you in a couple of weeks and I'll let you know how that goes.
Yeah.
Cause I feel like that'd be really helpful, I guess I'll find out once I take that approach myself.
And it's, none of this is easy. It's hard work, and this is why an approach like D.A.R.E isn't for everyone. It's only for the people who are really willing to do the work and who, are willing to act bravely and put themselves in situations and apply the tools. Most people will prefer the route of medication to try and just numb the sensations away. And I'm not anti-medication. I think it plays a vital role in getting people back out into life again. Just the problem with medication is that oftentimes people get stuck on it for life, for no good reason. They're just stuck on it and it becomes a real crutch for them. They feel that without the medication, they'd be lost.
Yeah. I see that happening all the time with not just anxiety, but all kinds of other things. We don't have to dive down that rabbit hole right now. I do have one other question in regards to like the D.A.R.E process and maybe some of the shame or other things tied to anxiety. And this is a very personal like thing to me or story, I guess. And that's, I've spent a lot of my life. I feel like a lot of my anxiety has come from a place of like self-doubt, like a voice in the back of your head that's like, am I good enough to be doing what I'm doing right now? And then the anxiety rises from there. Is that something that's common with people who struggle with, like, I guess, since mine manifests itself in more of a social anxiety? Is that...
Yeah, that's the big connection with social anxiety. So most of the time, people with social anxiety have got low self-esteem. So there's a self-esteem issue generally driving the kind of social anxiety. And because it's a conversation in your head that happens anytime you're in a social situation, which is, I'm not good enough. In this setting, I'm not good enough. And you're comparing yourself to everyone around. And then it spirals, of course. And it's like, what do they think of me? And, I'm just after making a really, saying something stupid, and now it's getting worse. And, the way a negative spiral of thoughts can really spiral down very fast. And then you're suddenly in a ball of sweat and trying to escape.
Yeah. I can relate.
So, I think with social anxiety, D.A.R.E is great for dealing with the sensations and empowering you to stay in the situations and overcome the fear of those sensations in the social anxiety in that social setting. But there still is work that has to be done on self-esteem. So there's something there, something deeper, which needs to be worked on. And one of the exercises I have in D.A.R.E towards the end of the book is a really simple exercise where you just go around repeating ad nauseum that you love yourself. So it's like all the time, I love myself. You're taking money out from the ATM, I love myself. You're brushing your teeth, I love myself. And it's a very simple exercise, which actually comes from a different book called Love Yourself. You might know it, Kmet. What's the author's name? Anyway, the book is called Love Yourself. And it's just such a powerful way, it's such a powerful sentence to get to the core issue. Something, generally this stuff is childhood stuff, and it just goes all the way down there and kind of, I think, can rewire a lot of that stuff that happened, and means that you don't have to spend years in therapy, but you can kind of have this shortcut by just kind of rewiring the way you think about yourself through constant repetition. So that might be a powerful tool for anyone who's suffering from, social anxiety.
Yeah, I'm taking some notes on this. I'll keep you posted on how it goes. Yeah,
do please. I'd love to hear.
Yeah. So taking it to like I'm assuming people come up to you quite a bit and they're like, hey, Barry, I'm struggling with anxiety. I've read your book, or I've looked at D.A.R.E, and I'm still struggling. What advice do you have for those people?
So generally, it's because there's still fear. So, for example, if people in our coaching programs might say, sometimes they make progress and then they have a big setback and they feel like they're back to stage one. And a lot of time, it's really just encouraging people to get back doing the work, to get back practicing, and to find out as well, are they still resisting the anxiety in a major way? So are they still, when they're saying, bring it on, are they really saying, God, I couldn't handle it if it got any worse than this? Is there another conversation happening at the same time? And this is why practice and repetition is so important. And if you're finding it really daunting, really challenging, you've got to break it down into smaller steps. So like driving is a huge thing for a lot of people who suffer from anxiety. And if you're afraid of driving on the highway, then it means you need to start off driving local roads and build your confidence up, or maybe doing a small stretch of the highway on a Sunday morning where there's very little traffic. So, you know yourself, how you could break these bigger goals up into smaller steps. And it's about trying to find those situations where you can take it step by step. Another example might be, people are afraid of flying and having a panic attack in the airplane. Well, a good kind of way to practice that without having to get on an airplane every time is to get in elevators and ride elevators in buildings, because it's a similar fear of being stuck, similar claustrophobic fear behind it. So, you can use your imagination and come up with different ways to practice, but it may just be that you need to break it down into even smaller steps, because you're not feeling that boost in confidence yet. And that's why the smaller steps will show you, those, when you get those small wins, you start to feel confident you can take on bigger things.
Do you have an example of maybe one of those first couple steps that you could share?
Well, it really does depend. Do you want to talk about your social anxiety stuff, or,
Yeah, we can use me as an example. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, so for example, give me an example of a social situation that you really struggle with.
Yeah, now I'm put on the spot. All right, I'm trying to think back to the last time I really had a lot of social anxiety. I think it was, so a lot of places that I go to, I typically know generally quite a few people in the room, and I tend to gravitate towards those people. And I feel like I'm pretty good at meeting new people, making friends, but occasionally I'll be in this spot where I don't know anyone new, or I don't know anyone, and there's just like new people all over, and I kind of freeze. And I definitely get like a ton of social anxiety just about like, and people are going to listen to this and be really surprised that I'm saying this because of how easy it sometimes is for me, but it's typically because I have someone else in the room that I know that I'm friends with. Mm-hmm. But if I'm by myself, then, I sometimes just get really, really bad anxiety and just kind of like keep to myself. And kind of freeze a little bit. Like I have the desire to go start conversations with people and meet new people, but I freeze when I get the anxiety. Yeah.
And, a lot of the time is that people don't get enough opportunity to practice in those particular situations. So it shows up at, there's a work conference or something that you have to go to once a year, or generally kind of bigger stuff. But like a really good way of practicing just in that particular situation where you're in a group with no people, you're on your own and you've got to interact. So a very easy way to start practicing those things are joining meetup.com, for example, and just finding groups and putting yourself in those situations. That can be really powerful just because it's very non-committal. It's very light socially. It's, you meet up on a Thursday evening in whatever setting, and it's no big deal if you come or go, depending on the kind of meetup it is. And they can just be great ways to plug into a whole new group of people that you can approach, talk to, and apply, for example, D.A.R.E as you're doing that, and then leave at any point, because there's no commitment that, you have to be there the whole day. You can just come in and leave. And that can be just a great small step in order to start moving towards bigger goals of having to, for example, spend a whole weekend on a retreat with people who you don't know, or, that maybe a work setting where you're going to be stuck with people for much longer periods of time. So, people have got to use their imagination and come up with creative ways to practice in. But the difference is if you're using D.A.R.E, you've got this toolkit that you didn't have before. So it gives you an extra level of confidence to enter into those situations because you feel like, okay, I've got something new that I can play around with here. I've got a different way of approaching this. And what I'm really doing here is I'm going to turn this nervous arousal into excitement and see how that goes for me. And if it doesn't work, the first time you get back out there and you try it again, because, exposure therapy is the fastest way to get to overcome a problem like anxiety.
Yeah, you've given me a lot to think about here, because I'm thinking through some of the best relationships I've built with people that weren't in my friend group or network, and a lot of those have come from when I just like pushed myself in those situations to, just strike up a conversation with a stranger about something that it looks like we might have in common. And so I think that kind of speaks to in the D.A.R.E process, like running towards your fear and like, it's just getting in the habit of when that nervous energy comes up, like taking that as a signal of action versus like freezing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the freeze state is so we know the fight and flight response, towards anxiety, but there's also a freeze state. And I think a lot of people enter a freeze state, particularly as well in social situations. You kind of just freeze up. You don't know what to say. Whereas, this is putting you into a state of flow, into a state of movement and action. And it's much more empowering.
Yeah, I definitely agree, because it's better than just standing there and being frozen. Well, I know we're kind of running out of time, and there was some other stuff I really want to talk to you about, like the tech and CBD oil, but I'm probably just gonna skip those for now and just jump to our last 3 questions to make sure we can get you out of here on time. So first question I have for you: what do you try to do on a daily basis that you feel like gives you an edge on your day or makes your day a win?
Yeah, it changes. Like, I suppose I'm like everyone else. I'm trying to find the routine that suits me best. And that means I've been playing around with lots of different ways and approaches, Currently, it's yoga. So if I can get to do yoga in the morning, it's I find it sets me up really well for the day. And because this is just me personally, but I don't have much flexibility. I'm quite locked up a lot of the time. My body is. So I think yoga is a great tool for me to help me kind of bring back flexibility. And like when you have flexibility in the body, I think there's this flow or flexibility to your thoughts as well that comes with that. So I'm finding it quite effective. So I'm not the best guy to recommend, how people should be doing their daily routines, because I'm like everyone else. I listen to all the podcasts and try and take what I can. And I think you've got to find what resonates or clicks with you, because you'll never stick with anything that doesn't, that you really don't kind of enjoy doing. So it's about finding some routine, some even one thing that you kind of go, yeah, that's something I could do indefinitely. That's something I could make a habit out of. And a lot of the time, I think, like, we're trying to, so we're looking to increase happiness levels. And a lot of that is about kind of eliminating what makes us unhappy, rather than trying to add new things in. And, I know, for example, in my case, not getting 8 hours of sleep makes me unhappy the next day. It makes me kind of grumpy and tired. So there's, it's really about knowing yourself, knowing what works for you, and then trying to do more of that. But I like everyone else, find it hard to stick at routines. I try meditation and do mindfulness, but I just go through periods of where it works, and then when I fall out of doing it. So
yeah, I can definitely relate on that. There was probably a good year where I was meditating and doing yoga almost every morning, and I just felt amazing. But it just got to be too much in the morning, like too much time, because so and I definitely agree with your point on the flexibility of the body. Kind of gives you more flexibility in the mind. So the next question I have for you, and you can plug your own book if you'd like to, but what do you think the most impactful book that you've read has been?
I would say Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's just a very, very powerful story of meaning, finding meaning in suffering. And that's kind of, a lot of as well, what I talk about in D.A.R.E is about finding that meaning in the pain. So discovering how you can learn from the anxiety that you're experiencing. So, that book, it's the first part of it is, of course, this harrowing story of the concentration camps. And then the second part is about how meaning can turn or can make that kind of suffering very tolerable, and takes the despair out of suffering. So there's so much in that book. I'm going to have to go back and read it again.
Yeah, I saw that book recommended so many times, and I finally read it probably just recently in like November, December. And it was a really good read. I mean, it's tough to read through some of it and really like put yourself in the shoes of Dr. Frankl, but it's definitely worth it.
Because the story is that story of concentration camp. I don't think there's any suffering worse than that. And to hear then how he just adopted kind of a mindset that got him through that, it's amazing. It's quite inspiring.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think everybody should really read that book. It should be required reading in school to really see things from that perspective. So the last question that I have for you is, what message would you like to leave the audience today?
Well, if anyone does suffer from anxiety, know that it's not something that you have to be stuck with your whole life. I think that's the most important message, that it's not something wrong with your brain. It's a behavioral problem, and you can definitely overcome it if you're willing to just put in the work. And I think if you suffer from anxiety, it's so important to overcome it, because then so many other areas of your life improve. Your relationship, your career, your general level of happiness improves. Because anxiety, has this way of stealing time from us and stealing precious moments and opportunities. Even on a very subtle level, you mightn't even be aware of how it's doing it, but it's stopping you often from pushing outside your comfort zone, taking on new things, or, taking on new challenges. So the more you can overcome your anxiety, particularly anxiety disorder, the better you will be for it. And if anyone wants to find out about my work, I suppose we've launched a new app recently. Maybe that's one place you could go. So if you just search D.A.R.E in the app stores, or D.A.R.E on Amazon, you'll find the book there as well. And the website's D.A.R.E.response.com. That's where you'll find out everything.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is a wrap for this week's show. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode, and big thank you to Barry for stopping by and sharing his experience in anxiety research and his personal experience with anxiety. Now, if you'd like to find the book or find any more information from Barry McDonagh and his programs that he runs, go ahead and check out the show notes. We got links to all those different things. I highly recommend the book, especially if you're someone who suffers from anxiety. The processes are extremely helpful, and they really do help you kind of get a bit of a grasp on how you can make progress in your anxiety relief. Now, on another note, if you think you might like or you might enjoy hearing more podcast episodes from us, reading one of our articles or blog posts, or maybe checking out one of our online courses, go ahead and head over to helixacademy.to and sign up for our newsletter today. Now, that is a wrap for this week's show. My name is Trevor Carlson, and I look forward to you tuning in again next week. This episode of The Formula was produced by Helix Academy, and the music was provided by the artist known as Moods. Make sure and check him out on Facebook or Spotify. That's MOODS.